Lewis Hamilton just got hit with a technical investigation, and what the FIA found could cost him everything. Ferrari's engineers told him the car felt broken. Now the FIA says a suspension part may have broken the rules. If this is confirmed, Hamilton could be disqualified from the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and his season would end in disgrace. And the twist: the problem may have been there all year, hiding in plain sight. Subscribe now, because this scandal could explode before the week is over. The FIA's technical panel launched a detailed review of Hamilton's SF25 after routine post-race telemetry showed inconsistencies in rear suspension load patterns. Engineers noticed repeated lateral spikes during cornering that didn't correlate with steering input or tire load. These anomalies appeared most clearly in Sector 3, a sequence of sweeping right-handers where rear-end balance is critical. The moment telemetry diverges from expected mechanical response, it triggers a flag. And in this case, it triggered a full teardown inspection of Hamilton's rear suspension assembly. What the FIA found was subtle but deeply significant. The right rear suspension element appeared to be deflecting under load beyond its homologated tolerance. In simple terms, a part that's supposed to remain stiff was flexing slightly when subjected to high cornering forces. This behavior is governed by Article 11 of the Formula 1 technical regulations, which explicitly prohibits structural deformation beyond approved limits. The rules make no exception for intent benefit or fatigue. If the part deforms outside its allowed range, the car is illegal. To verify the issue, the FIA subjected the component to compliance testing using calibrated stress rigs. These devices simulate real track loads in controlled conditions. Under testing, Hamilton's suspension element deflected by over 3 millimeters more than its documented flex window. That's an enormous deviation in Formula 1, where design tolerances are usually within tenths of a millimeter. The flex was directional and repeatable, confirming it wasn't a one-off failure or damage. It was behavior embedded in the component structure, and that's what makes it a breach. Comparison with Charles Leclerc's car made things even more damning. Leclerc ran nearly the same suspension specification, and his corresponding component remained within the expected compliance range. That discrepancy removed the possibility of a systemic defect or miscalculation in Ferrari's CED simulations. It pointed instead to an isolated issue, either an assembly mistake, a batch irregularity, or a part used past its service life. All three are still violations of FIA standards, which require teams to ensure that every component on the car performs within legal parameters at all times. Video footage added further weight to the evidence. High-speed cameras placed at turn 17 captured visible asymmetry in how Hamilton's car exited high-load corners. In 3 separate laps, the rear right corner appeared to compress more aggressively than the left under identical loads. Combined with onboard footage and Your8 sensor data, the FIA was able to model the dynamic deflection. The data matched the mechanical findings from the rig test. What they saw on track instability, unpredictable grip loss, asymmetric rotation, all pointed back to a single source: illegal compliance under lateral stress. This kind of breach isn't about whether Hamilton gained time. It's about legality. The FIA doesn't need to prove advantage, only that the car did not behave as it was homologated to behave. If a part flexes when it shouldn't, or behaves differently than what the team submitted during technical declarations, it breaks the rules. That's why, even though Hamilton finished 8th well off the podium, far from contention, the penalty could still be disqualification. In the FIA's view, legality is not conditional on performance. At this point, Ferrari has only 2 possible defenses: to prove that the part was within spec and the test was flawed, or to argue the deviation occurred due to accidental damage or degradation during the race. But telemetry does not support a failure. The part behaved consistently across multiple laps. It didn't degrade. It deflected identically under the same loads, lap after lap. Which means, in the eyes of the FIA, it was illegal from the start. And if that's confirmed, the penalty isn't just likely, it's automatic. In modern Formula 1, the rear suspension isn't just there to absorb bumps, it's an aerodynamic weapon. Every element of the system, from the wishbones to the pushrod angles, is designed to stabilize the rear ride height under load. That's crucial for ground effect cars like the SF25. A consistent platform means the underfloor aerodynamics stay balanced through cornering and acceleration. But if suspension arm flexes unexpectedly, the car's rear end lowers more than planned, increasing downforce temporarily, but also changing how the car behaves in real time. That's exactly why the FIA regulates dynamic deformation with zero tolerance. The flex observed on Hamilton's right rear component wasn't massive, but it broke the line between passive stiffness and active compliance. Under peak lateral load, the kind you see in Sector 3 at Yas Marina, the part deflected beyond its homologated limits. That means the car's aerodynamic balance subtly shifted mid-corner, improving rotation and rear grip without changing wing levels or tire pressures. And because that behavior wasn't part of the car's approved design spec, it violated Article 11. Even if it was unintentional, the behavior itself makes the car illegal. This isn't about cheating, it's about control. When teams design suspension components, they declare exactly how much load a part can take before it flexes. That data is reviewed and approved by the FIA before the season begins. But any variation in carbon layup, manufacturing inconsistencies, or overuse can lead to unexpected flex. In Hamilton's case, the data shows a pattern. The component wasn't failing, it was operating consistently, but outside the legal envelope. That makes it less of a sudden error and more of a hidden weakness one Ferrari failed to detect before race day. Now factor in Hamilton's setup. He prefers a rear end that's responsive under rotation, but still stable on exit. This means more rear compliance, a softer response to throttle when coming out of high-speed corners. Ferrari tailored his suspension setup accordingly, likely adjusting damping rates and load mapping. But if one component within that system was also physically flexing under pressure, the effect is amplified. It could have made the rear more predictable mid-corner, ironically offering Hamilton the kind of confidence he was still missing over team radio. Leclerc's car didn't show the same behavior. That's key. If both Ferraris had identical issues, this might point to a design flaw. But because only Hamilton's component showed the illegal flex, the FIA is treating it as an isolated case, and thus, one that demands accountability. It could have been a different part batch, a missed stress cycle, or even an alignment error during car build. Whatever the cause, the rules are clear. The team is responsible for ensuring every component behaves within spec, regardless of the conditions or driver preferences. This case also highlights the brutal accuracy of F1's compliance protocols. The part flexed just a few millimeters, and that alone was enough to trigger a full investigation. In a sport where teams operate at the limit of physical possibility, those margins are everything. A single oversight in manufacturing or part tracking can undo a weekend. That's why teams have engineers whose sole job is to validate component stiffness and life cycle before a car hits the track. Somewhere in that chain, Ferrari missed something. And now it's come back to haunt them. Looking ahead, the implications for 2026 are huge. As the sport transitions into its next regulatory phase, with revised chassis dimensions and tighter ground effect control, the FIA will likely double down on component compliance. Flexi floors were the first battleground. Now, suspension arms are next. The Hamilton case sets a precedent. Even minor, unintended flex will not be tolerated. Teams will need to reinforce quality control, update their part validation protocols, and assume that every camera, every sensor, and every millimeter matters. Because in Formula One, legality isn't flexible, and neither is the future. If the FIA officially rules that Hamilton's SF25 breached Article 11 due to legal rear suspension flex, the consequences will be immediate and irreversible. The standard penalty is disqualification from the race classification. That means Hamilton's 8th place finish in Abu Dhabi disappears, along with the points Ferrari earned for it. While those points may not seem critical in isolation, they could shift the final standings in the Constructors' Championship. Depending on the recalculation, Ferrari could drop below Mercedes a catastrophic end to a season already filled with underperformance. For Ferrari, this would represent the final unraveling of a year that began with ambition and ended in doubt. They brought Hamilton in to stabilize the project, to add experience, and to deliver wins. Instead, his debut season in red may conclude with a technical infraction. It's not the kind of legacy anyone imagined. Ferrari would be forced to answer the worst kind of question. How could the most experienced team on the grid allow an illegal component to go undetected, especially on the car of a 7-time world champion? The personal impact on Hamilton cannot be overstated. He came to Ferrari with one goal: to chase his 8th world title. And while 2025 was never truly competitive, he remained the team's symbol of composure and determination. Now, with a race disqualification looming, his credibility as a leader and development asset is under pressure. If this penalty goes through, it won't just stain his record, it may fracture his relationship with a team already walking a thin line between progress and panic. Internally, the consequences for Ferrari are severe. Charles Leclerc has already made it clear that 2026 is his make or break year. His post-Abu Dhabi comments were pointed, "I need results, not rebuilds." If Ferrari is disqualified from a season finale, not for strategy or performance, but for technical non-compliance, it reinforces the idea that the team is still structurally flawed. Leclerc, whose contract includes performance-based escape clauses, could now face even more pressure to walk. And if he does, Ferrari loses not just a driver, but stability itself. Other teams aren't staying silent either. Red Bull has already hinted that they'll be watching how the FIA handles this case, especially since they've been targeted heavily in past seasons for pushing technical boundaries. McLaren, the dominant force of 2025, will use this moment to reinforce their image as clean, efficient, and fully compliant. Even Aston Martin and Mercedes have issued subtle statements applauding the FIA's scrutiny. The paddock smells blood. And in F1, political capital matters just as much as engine power. Sponsors are watching too. Ferrari's image has always been about heritage, excellence, and discipline. But a season-ending investigation, especially one involving a car part that broke the rules, threatens that image. Global partners who invest hundreds of millions want certainty. And right now, Ferrari looks exposed. With contract renewals looming and 2026 development already underway, this kind of public controversy is the last thing Maranello needed. The damage isn't just on the track. It's in the boardrooms, the marketing departments, and the long-term planning strategies. And then there's the broader message. If Hamilton is disqualified if a component flexed by just a few millimeters and that alone erases a Grand Prix, the signal to all teams is clear: zero tolerance. The FIA is drawing a hard line heading into 2026. There will be no forgiveness, no grace period, no gray areas. You race legal or you don't race at all. Hamilton's penalty may hurt Ferrari in the short term, but in the long term, it may reshape how every team approaches compliance, innovation, and risk. Because from now on, every detail matters.